everybody really understood that the software, that we've based our economy and our national security on software. That software is made with unsafe components and unsafe practices, and it's delivered with unsafe configurations. Why on earth would you build a system that is so brittle? Person using the system who makes an innocent mistake can lead to the downfall of the company. But good news is we do know how to make software substantially safer.
Hello and welcome back to Threats, Pitfalls, and Risk Myths, the TPRM Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Lee, and today I'm going to be joined by Bob Lord. Bob is an absolute legend. He led security at places like Twitter and Red Hat. He was the CISO at Yahoo, Rapid7, and the DNC. He then went off to serve the greater good, leading secure by design efforts for the U.S. government at CISA. And now he provides policymakers with insights on security and risk through his work at the Institute for Security and Technology. In this episode, we're going to dive deep into the risk myths and the Stop Hacklore movement that Bob started to shine a light on the risk myths and security advice that sounds great in a vacuum, but in reality, detracts from security by distracting us from what really matters. We're also going to get into why we should be blaming vendors rather than users for security issues, why piling on more rules is rarely the answer, and what secure by design practices should actually look like. Let's jump in. Hey everybody, and welcome to Threats, Pitfalls, and Risk Myths, the TPRM Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Lee, and today we have on Bob Lord. We're so excited to have you here, Bob. You have an illustrious history in the security field, so we're very honored to have you as a guest.
Thanks for having me on.
And for those that don't know, Bob has been in security for quite a long time here. I mean, you were running security teams, Red Hat, you had Twitter, CISO at Yahoo, the DNC, and then over at CISA, helping the federal government kind of get best practices in place. I mean, just it's really great that you have such a broad exposure to all of these different organizations.
Yeah, and a lot of those experiences have just kind of compounded on each other, and I think we're going to talk about one of the ways it's sort of compounded in the weird world of hack lore.
Yeah, that's I mean, so it's a big thing because so Bob and I had met up at some event in the city a couple of months ago when you were talking about getting this thing rolling. I think it's something that bothers a lot of security professionals, but none of us really did anything about it. You know, we like to complain. And the whole hack lore thing it's very interesting because and I know you've gotten some pushback from other people who don't quite get it, but it's all of these things that people think are good ideas, but really aren't helpful in the grand scheme of helping us secure things. Could you maybe talk more about, like, what led you to be actually motivated more than the rest of us to do something about this?
Well, just rewinding a little bit, when I got to the Democratic National Committee after the 2016 hacks, one of the things I had to figure out is how can I, on a shoestring budget, secure all of these folks? And the answer is I have to make sure that they're doing the right things, not only when they're connected to the network, but when they're out living their lives and their personal accounts. And so it's the classic CISO problem of the attacker going where it's easiest to attack them at work. You attack them at home. It's the same cost. In many cases, it's a lot cheaper. And so what I found is in the process of working with real humans, it turns out we use really strange language in the world of cybersecurity. Like, we can't make up our minds between two-step authentication, MFA, 2FA, and these are things that we all take for granted. But then you sit down with somebody one-on-one and you try to work with them, and you realize we have really created a landscape it makes it very, very, very difficult and challenging for folks to do the simplest things. And the technology is part of that, language is part of that. And so all of those experiences led me to create the DNC security checklist, which is still out there and they continue to maintain it. It's not a political document. It's really just about how to not get hacked using the simplest things you can do. So I went through and I did that. And since then, I just continue to see on a regular basis advice that it was expired long before I joined the DNC.
It may have never been valid in some cases.
In some cases, there was a germ of truth, but it was just blown out of proportion, or things like don't use cafe Wi-Fi because the barista is going to be spying on you and stealing your credit card numbers. There was a much bigger germ of truth of that in 2010, but those of you who remember a plugin for Firefox called Firesheep will remember that it actually was possible for you to eavesdrop in on conversations in the cafe, not only watch people's Twitter and Facebook accounts go flying by, but you could push a button and then become them because it would steal their session cookies. And so that was a real deal.
Back before it was TLS and HTTPS everywhere.
Exactly. So the thing we used to do is we used to encrypt the name and password when you were transmitting that to the service, and then the service would then fall back to HTTP unencrypted, and life was great. And so since then, a lot of things have changed, and people in your audience probably already know about all the improvements in the browsers and the operating systems and other stuff. So all of that.
But one thing I think people don't necessarily get is like, because when you're pointing these things out, I noticed, when you're posting on LinkedIn and whatever, people would then push back, and it's security people who know things, and they're saying, yes, but why isn't it good to tell people to use a VPN on top of whatever when you're connecting in the library or something? And I think they're kind of missing the point of the whole argument of hack lore diluting the actual meaningful advice we want to give.
That's exactly right. So one of the things I learned the hard way is when I sit down and work with people one-on-one, they'll often say that they want to spend a lot of time making sure that their personal security posture is good. But the reality is that everybody's very busy and they have lives to live, and they don't want to sit there for hours a month curating their personal digital security practices.
It's a real surprise to me.
Well, it is a surprise to some people because, we will hear people say, like, I'll do anything to not get hacked. And you say, okay, well, how about this? And they're like, well, yeah, I can't do all of that. That's a lot.
I mean, I'm like that's crazy.
That's crazy. So what we need to do is just understand that people, no matter what they tell you, will only really spend minutes per year improving their digital security. Now, there are exceptions, of course. Especially people who have just lost their accounts, they'll actually spend a lot more time. But in general, just count on minutes per year. So the question is, what are the smallest number of things you can do that will have the biggest effect and the biggest improvement in their security posture? And it turns out that the basics are still the basics. So please update your software. Please use MFA, use strong passwords. And since you can't remember 16-character passwords that are uniquely generated for 300, 400 sites, you're going to have to use a password manager. And if you can get people to do that, you have dramatically reduced the chances of them falling victim to the standard kinds of attacks that we're just awash in these days. And so anytime you suggest something else, something that they should do or something that they shouldn't do, you are stealing cycles from the things that really work. It's just that simple.
Yeah, but I think that gets lost on folks often. It's just there's limited bandwidth and limited attention. I think the same thing when I go to places and see 35 policies and they're all 16 pages long, and I'm like, no one's reading any of these, right? Like that is just not a thing anyone's doing. Instead of focusing on what you really need them to do and where you don't have technical controls that are otherwise going to be impervious. I think that's a strong argument you've made is like, not having it be the user's fault where like, oh, you got phished. Well, you should have followed my 17-step guide and none of this would have happened in the first place. Making sure we're thinking about it. And this goes maybe to your secure by design and shift left. They're all sort of tied together, but having those technical controls that make it so the user doesn't have to think about it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a lot of the advice that we have put into the HackLore website, so you can all go visit that at hacklore.org. And it's very simple. That advice, those are still the basics, but we also really have to take into account the ways that we have unintentionally put the burden of staying cyber safe on individuals and enterprises. And since the vast majority of enterprises in the United States are small businesses of under 500 people, I mean, many of those shops, they're lucky to have an IT person. They certainly don't have security professionals with lots of experience. So we have inadvertently created an environment where we've just pushed all the responsibility down to places where it can't possibly be mitigated. What we need to do is change the mental model and start pushing the responsibility upstream. And so you could think about the fact that there are still products today that allow the administrator of the product to not have MFA. Like that's just the sort of
the Snowflake up until last year, I guess, right?
You said it, not me, but yeah, absolutely. So these are the kinds of things where we don't want to be in a position of blaming tens or thousands or millions of people. We just want to say, hey, you can control this better upstream, and you can do it at scale, and you can do it properly.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things I've found when running security programs is it's one of those things also where if you're blaming users, obviously not effective, but on top of that, you don't get a good relationship with your own users. And if your team kind of models that same behavior, your team doesn't have a good relationship with engineering or whatever, because you're stuck blaming them for things. It just becomes less likely they're going to come to you when they actually do have problems, because you're kind of like
if you've created an environment where you're blaming them for having clicked a link, God forbid that somehow clicking a link leads to actual code running. That's
clearly we failed on many levels if that happens.
Things that have failed at that point, and we need to step back and separate the proximate causes of incidents from the ultimate causes. So the proximate causes are those that happened, just left of boom, but we really need to go much further back. So if you say somebody clicked a link, well, it's never actually the link that is the problem. It's what they do afterwards. And I've seen this before where people click the link. Oh, it looks like the login page. Oh, it wants me to download this thing. Okay, I'll download it, and then I'll go find it on the desktop, and then I'll launch it. And then it actually runs because they have administrator privileges. And so that's a series of problems, missed opportunities for controls. And all of a sudden we blame the user for that. That's a systems problem. And unfortunately, we still have this pervasive belief that the human is the problem. And you've heard this quote, and it's everywhere. 90% of all breaches are because of human error. It's insane.
What does that mean? Yeah, and it's also yes, but which human made the error in this point?
Possibly be true. If that is even remotely the case, you have to ask, why on earth would you build a system that is so brittle that a person using the system who makes an innocent mistake can lead to the downfall of the company? That simply just doesn't pass the sniff test. And yet that is the model that we seem to be using over and over and over again.
Yep. Well, and I think it combines with the hack lore thing, because now you have the two sort of working together, where one, you're trying to shove stuff off to the users and say, hey, this is all this stuff you have to remember. And then we're also overloading them with a bunch of things that don't matter or low likelihood, and then the argument being, well, this could happen, so you should protect against it. But they're kind of, again, losing the context of the human brain only has so much ability to focus on a few things at a time. And if you overload that, I know you've been writing about, I loved your analogies, because you had one about if we gave seatbelt warnings or elevator warnings in a similar way. And I thought that was amazing.
People are killed every year in elevator accidents. It's a very, very small number. Most of them are elevator technicians, but it can happen. But we don't tell people, as you're evaluating the risks of using the elevator, consider the following 7 things. That's absurd. The probability is just so low, and we sometimes confuse, and this is very strange among people who are supposed to be good at risk analysis and risk management, that we confuse the possibility with the probability. And we don't, and sometimes they're so wildly out of whack that you shouldn't even talk about it. I had to go do the research on the elevator thing. It's because I assume nobody.
Sure, it was a rabbit hole you could dive in. You're who are these people that are dying?
And how does that happen? Oh, okay. Well, that's unfortunate. But it's very, very rare. And should the number increase, you don't blame the people for having gotten into the elevator. You'd go back and say, what are the systemic problems that are happening that would create this problem? Is it a particular vendor? Is it a particular maintenance schedule? Is it a lack of regulations? Did the inspectors not do their jobs? There would be so many other places to look before you'd say, you know what? Shouldn't have gotten on that elevator.
I did like some of your advice you were writing, the schedule all your meetings on the same floor to eliminate the cross-floor attack surfaces.
That's exactly
that was,
and
it's very, I'm now being very mindful of that. I'm glad I'm working from home where I do not have an elevator.
Make sure that you schedule all of your holiday parties that are suspiciously on New Year's Eve. Make sure you schedule those to be a video call.
That's really how I'm going to do it this year, in the name of risk management, obviously. And how do you think, when it comes to just how you see security teams, because you talk to a lot of folks in security, how do you see this same sort of pattern mapping over when it comes to policies and trainings and how we cover edge cases, and, should we even be covering them? Because I think, it's one of these things where some people are just like, we need to be as secure as possible. And to them, that means we need to hit every single thing. But obviously it's missing, again, that reality of humans are humans, and you have to take that into account. I mean, how do you see this manifesting in actual programs?
Yeah, so a few things. One is that, again, we want to make sure that we're protected. So if you're a defender, you want to defend, you want to protect. And I often see people getting a little worked up about things that are they're very unlikely. And so, yes, you should worry about all those supply chain attacks. Absolutely. But you can't look me in the eye and tell me everybody has MFA for the access to the systems. Like, you got to start somewhere, and you have to figure out what the right set of priorities are. Like we are awash. I don't know how many phishing emails you get per week or per day, but I get a lot, and none of them are especially good. But we're all going to fall.
It's changing very fast, though.
They're coming fast, and if you're in the right company and have the right kinds of privileges, you're probably getting a lot more than I am. So I think the opportunity is to really step back and try to figure out how to sequence things. I often see people misdiagnosing what their problems are, and here's another. This is sort of a very difficult problem. So within many organizations, it is often the case that the security folk aren't really allowed to get close to the real problems and to create the real change that they need to. And so what they end up doing is buying tools that will maybe reduce the risks in some ways, but they're not able to go back and change some of the fundamentals that would allow you just to eliminate the risk altogether. So, in some of my jobs, the majority of my work was to kill things, to turn things off, and that is not something that everybody can do, and you can't do that. You can't do that infinitely. So, I certainly sympathize to all the folks out there who know what they need to do to reduce the risk dramatically, but the political situation within the organization is such that they cannot do that. So my heart goes out to those folks. I've been there.
Yeah, and I think, there is definitely something to that, right? Because a lot of what we do, all of what we do really involves other people's systems, besides like the tools you mentioned, where maybe people buy them because it gives them the sense of control, because this is the one thing they actually control, where the rest of engineering is probably outside your purview. You're supposed to oversee them, but you have kind of no specific authority to get things done. When it comes to things that people are putting into programs, though, that are diluting the broader message or maybe diluting their effectiveness, is there any examples that you see more often than not, as far as things you would be ripping out and you would pull out?
So I don't know if there's anything in particular. I remember, like, at one organization I worked at, I just spent a lot of time finding systems and then asking who the owner was. And although there was supposed to be a list of all this stuff, it turns out that was not always very accurate. And I just ask all the dumb questions, like who
another huge surprise here.
And people would say, oh, it's this team. I'm like, okay, but like, which human owns this? Like, somebody must want this. Some human must want this. And that's often very surprising to people, that I want to know which human is going to stand up and defend this. And often it's like
the Spider-Man meme, and they're all kind of pointing at each other. And
everybody. And so like, I can't tell you how many times I would get to somebody and they'd be like, I'm the human. I'm great. Okay. So I'm going to help you because this system, it's a little wonky. We haven't done a lot of upgrades on it, and we need to get some sensors on it. I'm going to help you. It's going to cost us, though. We're going to have to go figure out how to pay for this. We may need to have some consultants to come in and look at it. But I'm going to help you. Like, you don't have to do that, but you have to help me get the budget for this. And it's, in my experience, it's just been really amazing to see these arguments that something is critical for the business, to not be able to go get just a few dollars for it. So on the one hand, it's critical for the business, but you can't get a few dollars for it. So obviously there's a disconnect there. And in those cases, we're able just to say, okay, what if I just mothball this thing? What if I just create a little archive for it? We can rehydrate it anytime, but we're going to turn it off in the meantime. And I, with one exception, had to rehydrate one. And that was because it was a financial thing that only kicked off at the end of the quarter. And so luckily we had it mothballed.
They found you 2.5 months later and were like, hey,
where's my server? And I said, oh, all right, well, Yeah, we got it. We'll
Pop
rehydrate
that
it.
back on.
We'll put it back on, and
Yeah, and I think,
it's fine.
like a lot of this stuff ends up also, tying together, like between hack lore and us kind of focusing on the wrong things, to your work that you did at CISA, like helping provide recommendations and guidance on secure by design. And I think that's, I mean, it's interesting because it's something that everybody knows is a good idea. Like, unlike the hack lore thing where, people are saying, well, why shouldn't I tell people about the dangers of elevators and escalators? With secure by design, kind of universal acceptance that this is a great path forward. Yet at the same time, we still seem to have problems actually having that be implemented in practice to the degree that I think you or I or anyone else would really like to see. I mean, what do you think are kind of the main points of friction there?
So there are a few things. One is everything comes down to incentives. So the scary thing isn't that these products are designed by people who don't care. The scary thing isn't that they're incompetent. The scary thing is they're doing everything right based on the incentives that are in play. And as soon as you start to think about things like that, you say, well, what are the incentives? Well, one of the things we talk about is this idea not just of secure by design and by default, but secure by demand. How do we create a marketplace so that people know how to ask for security? And I had this conversation just earlier today. People say, oh yeah, people all want and ask for security. I'm like, I don't think they do. So go back to the 50s and 60s.
I agree with you.
When people wanted to buy cars, why did they buy cars? They bought cars, and the marketplace was designed to sell lifestyle. So this is the post-war era, and people wanted to have the cars that telegraphed that you were doing well. You wanted to have some muscle on it. You wanted to have some fins on it. You wanted to have some style and luxury. So that's what the car makers helped create the environment for, and that's what the customers wanted. And so that life was great. Safety wasn't a component of that conversation. And when Ralph Nader came around in 1965 and he wrote a book called Unsafe at Any Speed, he explained that safety was a component of the car. In fact, one of the major, if not the major factor that would relate to the likelihood of you being in an accident and the negative effect on the passengers, it was the design of the car itself, the design of the car. And that was radical. And so now we often think about safety as a factor of the car, and you don't want to buy a 2-star rated car, you want to buy a 5-star rated car. And so that was a transformation that took place. When you go take a look at some of the things that I've seen recently, there was a document, I forget which analyst group this was, but they said security is the second most important thing that customers are asking for after price or features or something like that. And then I was like, oh, well, that certainly can't be true. So like, how did they misunderstand that? So I scroll down, and then it says, oh, here's what security is. Security is things like encryption in transit, encryption at rest, backups, and like fine things.
These are table stakes things we're talking about.
Fine things, but like
it's like I like doors on my cars as well.
But how about guaranteed to not have any of the unforgivable vulnerabilities from that 2007 paper? I don't know if your listeners know about this, but in 2000,
memory safety and yes, all of that.
So like in 2007, MITRE wrote this report called Unforgivable Vulnerabilities. And if you haven't read it, it's a jaw dropper, because what did they say are these unforgivable sins that no vendor should be allowing to seep into their products in 2007? Cross-site scripting, SQL injection, command injection, directory traversal, classic buffer flows, things like that. Go back to the MITRE report that was released last week, which is the most dangerous weaknesses. What do you see? It's the same list. So we
even more unforgivable now.
It's crazy unforgivable now. So when I say that customers aren't asking for it, it's largely because I don't think they know how to ask for it. And so what we were trying to do with the Secure by Design program is provide that language so that we can go back and say, stop asking for military grade encryption, stop asking for HTTPS on every page.
It really does sound good though, right? Like who doesn't want military grade encryption, you know?
It's true, but it's not helpful. And so
it turns out that's the only thing that we have that people use. So
exactly. It's the only thing that really is kind of everywhere. So if we can create the right playbooks for folks, then I think they'll find their voice eventually. I'm convinced of that. So that's part of it, but there are many other incentives that create the world that we see today. If you want a really deep dive on this, there's a great book that came out also in 2007, 2008 called Geekonomics by David Rice. Highly recommend it. It's his examples are stale, but the industry hasn't really progressed so far. So all the lessons are still the same lessons, even though his examples are not quite fresh.
And I think, for most of us who are on, if you're working in software or you're kind of providing the services, we're trying to make where, we're getting secure by design into our organizations. But if you're on the buying side, like what are some things that people can do now that, because I think what I see in most cases is the business has decided we want to use this product. Yeah. Oh, security, can you put your stamp on it? Yeah. I mean, what sort of things can teams do to start changing that? They might not feel empowered right now, but what conversation should they have, or how do they drive that discussion in a different direction that enables them to actually make security a, kind of a buying criteria?
Well, I think this is exactly the right kind of question to ask. And I'm hoping that people who are listening to these podcasts who do have an idea or who have some modest success are going to start publishing what they have found to work or things that they found to not work. I do think it is worth understanding when I talk about these unforgivable vulnerabilities, these are in that paper, they describe these vulnerabilities as canaries in the coal mine. So even if your intrusions are not always going to be because of cross-site scripting or whatever, these are an indication that the company hasn't invested in robust protections and continuous improvement in ways that would eliminate these recurring classes of coding error. And so I do think there's an opportunity for folks to really take a look at the history of these various products and to make that part of the conversation. It's very difficult because in some ways it's a race to the bottom because, features and quality, extensibility, reliability, all of those things are going to dominate the conversation. But the more that you have to go out and buy other tools to compensate for the weaknesses in the software, there are ways for you to start to itemize those. And back to the car analogy, there used to be a thing called a camber compensator. So if you bought a brand new, beautiful Corvair or Porsche, it turns out that these would have this tendency to roll over in gusty winds or in sharp turns. That's not good. So if you happen to know that your product was beautiful but defective in this very interesting way, you could go into the back of the car magazines and look up an ad, and you could go find a camber compensator, which would change the tilt ratio of the wheels when you're either being pushed by the wind or turning corners. Wait 6 to 8 weeks, get the thing in the mail, and then at your own time and expense, you could bolt it on underneath your car.
This sounds like an excellent solution. That
it sounds.
I'm sure it solved all the problems by design.
It sounds like the cybersecurity world, and exactly what you just said on Reddit. It's not entirely clear from my reading of the comments about all these camber compensators. It's not clear that it really did much to solve the problem. So
it makes you feel good. I mean, I think there's something to that.
I paid my $55 and got out my all of my tools and jacked the car up and deployed my camber compensator.
When it comes to some of that procurement process, at least in my mind, and this could be totally imaginary, just myself making me feel better. But even introducing that little bit of friction of asking the right questions instead of asking, do you have military grade encryption? But hey, let's see, if we look at a recent penetration test or vuln scan, what sort of things are here? And I think this is where it gets hard for people because a lot of the folks who are doing the reviewing don't necessarily, they see it. And if you're not an engineer, what are you supposed to do with the results other than make sure that they say remediated? But there is something worth kind of digging in further there. If it's a modern web app and you're seeing, maybe they had cross-site scripting and they patched it, but it's why are these even there in the first place?
That's exactly.
And driving that discussion can be super helpful. Again, because if it introduces some level of friction, you're helping the other party's security team because in the future, the sales team's now going to say, hey, like, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again because, I missed whatever at the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
The incentives really have to come down to them closing deals.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that would be helpful to the extent that folks are part of various collective organizations, whether it's ISACs or just any sort of community where they come together with other peers, there may be a way to amplify your questions and your problems by using the power of the community to all ask the same thing. And the companies
absolutely
are going to do the right thing. They're going to give the customers what they want. It's just that they haven't had the collective voice to ask for things like improvements in the SDLC. That's just not how we've thought about software. We've thought about software as simply being a series of vulnerabilities that you then at your own time and expense go improve. That's why I stop saying vulnerabilities as much. And you'll hear me say things like product defects. And it's because when it's a defect in the product, who's accountable. The word vulnerability is sort of an abstract thing. It's a factor of the code, but not really, but it doesn't telegraph to you what you should do about it and who's on the hook for it.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. And this is where I love a lot of the ways you approach different problems because like the words matter. And, most of us probably aren't thinking of the difference like, defect, vulnerability, whatever. But in aggregate, it actually does convey a certain meaning, even if you're not actively thinking about it. It kind of rings differently inside people's heads.
It does.
And I love the idea also of getting everybody on the same page, because if we're all asking for 10 different things and nobody's blocking a deal over it, is really doing anything, versus if all 10 groups of customers are asking for the exact, like, hey, you need to have unphishable MFA for all your admins, then like clearly that's going to get prioritized and we've moved the needle. We've enabled the other party's security team. It's kind of a big win for everybody, but we actually do have to have sort of a union sort of type of thing. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of different voices saying it turns into noise as far as the receiving party is concerned.
It's going to receive a strong signal. So, the question is, how can you deliver a strong and consistent signal that is spread across many different potential buyers? And I think there'll be many different answers to that kind of question, but that's the sort of thing that starts to move companies to change their internal investment profiles.
And are there things that, whether it's CISOs or whoever's buying, whether it's buying or internally, are there certain techniques or tactics that you see being more effective for, if you're buying software to say like, hey, like these are non-negotiable, even though, you might not actually have the power to block the deal? Like, what are sort of ways that as a security person who's involved in procurement then, of any sort of business tool, not necessarily security tools, but like what techniques work to kind of actually impart some leverage on the other parties?
So what I've seen work, and this is this is sporadic, so I don't think that I don't have a silver bullet. Maybe you do, and you'll tell me. But for me, and this is I think a function of my network, but I have always been able to reach out to the security teams at these various companies and talk to them. So that's not a privilege everybody has, but to the extent that you can build the network that gets you a little bit closer to not just the sales part of the organization, not just the product team, but the engineering team, that has been very, very helpful. The other thing I'll mention is that when I talk to people on the inside of some of these companies, I had this one person in particular say very clearly to me, but many other people have said something similar. He said, Bob, you didn't invent any of this secure by design stuff. Like all the stuff that you've been saying, we literally have PowerPoint decks that have been gathering virtual dust for years. We have circulated them many, many times, but we have not had...
I have so many jokes I could be saying right here that I'll just keep inside me.
Okay. You can tell them if you want. But it's like the engineering teams know what they want to do to make it. Like they don't like fixing the 9,000th directory traversal bug, the SQL injection bug. Like they don't love getting hit Friday at 4:30 p.m. with another one of these things. They know what they need to do, and they've often lobbied unsuccessfully to do the right thing. And so part of the thought experiment I run in my head, and I'll share with your audience, is how can we give oxygen to those folks who know what they need to do to improve the overall SDLC, to improve the quality of the product so that the customers don't have to deal with the constant barrage of of software updates. So I do believe that's why I'm an optimist, is because there's enough of the right stuff in the right places. We just have to find a way to activate them.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that, we had Jason Chan on a few weeks back. It obviously has some of the paved road things. And I mean, I think that was like a huge thing for many security teams to just kind of have as a principle to operate by. Like, how do we make it where it's the default way because the incentives are aligned, and it's the easy way because if it's the secure way and we have it, but it's not easy, then you still have that incentive mismatch. And I think you and I have talked about that plenty of times. That's really kind of the only thing this always comes down to. Yeah. So that's great. And I think when it comes to the vendor side, I mean, one thing at least I've always tried to do is work with the team internal who's doing the buying. And I'm like, look, I'm going to be kind of a pain in the ass, and I'm going to sort of slow this down a bit. I'm sorry, but this is like, we're going to try to make this happen. So you got to just back me up and, pretend that when you're talking to the other, the vendor, like, oh, we really want to go, but like security is going to block this unless X, Y, or Z happens. And probably to the broader point of, with hack lore and everything else, like you can't ask for everything. You can't give them a list of 30 things. So like, what is that important thing you want to have and get a concession for? Because you can't win all of that. And I mean, to your point, no silver bullet though. It's just like, hopefully that works, or, you're too small and they don't care. And they're like, too bad. Here's our paper.
Yep.
And so, I mean, I think when it comes to like AI stuff now, I mean, how do you feel? Because of course we have to ask AI based questions now. When it comes to secure by design though, I mean, do you see this as a net positive or, something that is negative? Because obviously there's vulnerabilities that get written, but also there's a lot of tools that are very good at finding vulnerabilities before you check stuff in.
Yeah. So a few things. So AI is software. And so we should expect that people who are making AI should do the same things that other makers of software should do. And so just to recap the secure by design principles that we put out in the CISA white paper, there's just 3 of them. So the first one is to take ownership of the customer's security outcomes. So don't just say like, oh, we had a switch, you didn't turn the switch, or we fixed it and sent out 93 patches. Why didn't you deploy those? Take ownership of the actual outcomes. We also want companies and software providers to embrace radical transparency. And so that often means providing more information about what's going on inside the factory than you would feel comfortable with. I think the way I think about it is it's the sort of transparency that will make you really nervous today, but in 5 years you will say, oh, that was actually no big deal. Like that's
like S-bombs before, I think was the big one no one wanted to share. And
absolutely. Making sure you publish CVE records for vulnerabilities that you discovered internally. You don't know if anybody ever was compromised, but to be able to say, no, we had a defect, it was our fault, we fixed it and we declared it. That's the sort of thing that builds confidence that you're not hiding anything. And then the third, and this is largely inspired by the quality by design efforts that go back to the post-World War II era, that when you see organizations that have achieved, and this is mostly like around physical manufacturing, when you see organizations that have achieved substantial increases in quality, those are all basically because of the personal leadership of a business executive. And so there's a guy named Joseph Duran who wrote a book called Quality by Design. And he describes this, and we quote him in the Secure by Design paper. But he basically says he knows of no exceptions. That's always led by a personal efforts of a business leader. So it's not something that they delegate the security to the quality team.
You create a center of excellence.
They actually think about these things from a cross-division standpoint. So AI is the same thing. So those who are creating software that happens to be able to do all sorts of fancy things, it's still software. And so we expect those to adhere to the secure by design principles. And you mentioned the ability for software to find vulnerabilities. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for that. One of the things that I would love to see even more is reminiscent of this idea that secure by design isn't shifting left harder, because
I like the sounds of that though.
Right. It says like there's a
shift left harder.
You just can't. There's just a point where there's no more left, because I don't want to find more memory safety vulnerabilities by having more AI find all the memory safety vulnerabilities. What I want is for the AI, and hopefully somebody listening can actually go build this as a product. I want it to tell me when it's more cost effective for me to use it to help translate to a different memory safe programming language, as just one example. And so how do I know when the architecture is just never going to lend itself to a safe product and to give me help to do that? That for me is really where the big bang for the buck comes from. And so yes, AI can go find vulnerabilities, but that's I think that's a losing battle. I think the winning battle is the one where it helps us rethink our architectures and gives us the ability to reduce the cost of retooling. That is the thing. Is when I talk to people and they say, "Oh, we would love to do this, but it's too expensive." Like, great. Can we use AI to reduce that cost? Because they know what to do. They know what they need to do. But they need the AI to figure out, where should I start? What things are going to be most interesting to an attacker, where I can start with those modules, those libraries first. You don't have to boil the ocean. You don't have to rewrite everything in Rust. That's absurd. But if you can figure out what is that overlap between the attack surface and the valuable gems that you have and what the bad guys want to do, start with those. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. Now, that's the optimistic side of things, but the world is also very complicated. And the reason that we have so much unsafe software isn't for lack of trying, it's for lack of incentives. And so you have to ask yourself, are the incentives aligned for us to get safer over time? And I'm on the fence about that. And one of the things I've seen in the news lately are companies who are applying AI to the operations, to the field, as opposed to the SDLC. And so one of the things I wonder is, are we going to end up with all of this AI working with all of this defective code, trying to find the bad guys faster, as opposed to
I think you know the answer to this one.
I know there's so much money that's going to go into this. And this also, in part of the other dysfunction is, like, as a CISO, it was easier for me to go ask for millions of dollars than it was to say, can I restructure how all the staff log in? And that's a real problem.
And it's a big change management problem that's awful and painful, and it's awful and painful, and it's much more glorious to stamp your name on, I put this new tool in and gave us some new capabilities. And
yeah, I think like at the DNC, we retooled a lot of things, and we saved money. So we saved over, I think, $1.2 million of recurring spend by shrinking the attack surface, moving people to Chromebooks, moving to FIDO, eliminating our phishing simulations.
So I think the impact of the breach there was much larger than any monetary label we could throw on.
But it's funny because at the end of the day, people are like, oh yeah, I like the Chromebook. Oh yeah, actually touching the little button on my FIDO token is like, that's a lot easier than what I was doing before. Like, I know it's actually easier, but you don't get that until you're right of the deployment. Left of the deployment, everybody's like, oh, our productivity, and then you get past it and you're like, oh yeah, it's not so bad. Actually, it's pretty good.
I think this is the one big win, I think, for secure by design and just incentive alignment. It's so rare we actually have all this in security, but like passkeys are the one where I think it's just a big win for everybody. And it's been so easy for me to sell everywhere, because it's like, hey, this is going to make it so much easier. No one likes to pull out their phone and unlock your phone and scroll to the right code and type the code in, or get out your SMS you received. And it's such a win, and it actually addresses like the biggest risks that we have when it comes to like people having their credentials phished.
It's not glamorous, but like the most common attack is the bad guy asks you for your name and password, and then you give it to them. And sometimes they then say, I need your 6-digit code, and then you give it to them. Like, that is just so pervasive that I
don't think people realize how often that happens. And it's not like, oh, it's dumb person who fell for it. It's like, you register a domain that looks like your domain, but you have an L instead of an I. And like, no one's going to notice that. You have a valid cert.
If you think that you're not going to fall for these scams, you're the perfect mark.
I think that's true.
We're going to fall for them. We're all going to fall for them. Question is, if we design the systems that are not brittle by design.
Nope. And I think that's really, when it comes to where people should prioritize, that is the one thing to keep in mind, is where do we hit these biggest ticket items that end up being the ones we know affect the most people, and how do we fix it in a way that's not brittle by design, that doesn't rely on user X to, not be reading the news while they're doing it, and oops, I didn't notice, and caused all of us to lose all of our data. And so, when it comes to, I guess, if there's one shift you think that would matter the most, one shift in mental models that people have. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of the stuff we talked to, but what would be the one biggest shift that you see your average security practitioner having, that if they were to kind of move their mind from this frame over to this one, would have the biggest impact?
So the thing that I think would help, if not just security practitioners, but if everybody really understood that the software that we've based our economy and our national security on software, and that software is made with unsafe components and unsafe practices, and it's delivered with unsafe configurations. But the good news is we do know how to make software substantially safer. We don't know how to make secure software. Nobody knows that. That's probably not possible. But we do know how to make software that is substantially more secure than it is today. And we need to start thinking about the economic reasons why it is the case that it's not so safe today, and what it is that we can do. So if everybody were to really think about that, we might see more people asking questions about the state of affairs when, once again, on a Thursday or Friday night, they have to figure out how to upgrade all of their edge networking gear because yet another directory traversal vulnerability allows an attacker to take complete control of their network. If we can get them to start asking about why this is the case, and it goes back to the unsafe components and processes and configurations, then, but not in a frustrated way, but in a genuine spirit of curiosity.
Yep.
I think they're going to find a voice in ways that will be surprising to me and to you, but it'll be authentic to what they're doing. So we just need to have that general awareness. We didn't have that with cars in 1962. We did in 1965. And so we just need far more awareness. And again, I'm an optimist. I wouldn't be in this business as long as I have been if I wasn't an optimist. But the right thing will happen if we get the right information in front of the right people.
Just because you've had a role in the government, I'm kind of curious your thoughts on, I mean, when you talk about cars, the big shift was passing legislation that mandated you have to do X, Y, or Z. Yes. I mean, do you see any chance of this happening? Because it seems weird to me, because I've been at events where there's 300 CISOs and somebody from I forget who, maybe it was CISA or somewhere in the federal government, and they were like, how many of you would like to see more regulation around cybersecurity? And basically every hand went up. Yeah. And it seems like it would be hard to imagine any other industry where people are like, please regulate us so we actually have some teeth to work with. Do you see that ever happening?
I see it happening at some point. I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon, but I also think there's so much that we can do in the meantime. There are actually many companies that are building products or parts of their organization. They're building features and products that are really trending hard towards secure by design principles. You mentioned the paved roads. Organizations that have a system where the developers have some guardrails. They can't do anything. It's a little bit hard to go off-road, not impossible. But if they stay in the paved roads, they're not going to be the ones who get in trouble when there's another SQL injection vulnerability. There's another team that is really monitoring that.
When it comes to how we can set the incentives right for whether it's regulatory or whatever, if it's things you can do beforehand, because regulatory change is not going to happen, let's say, in the next year.
So I do think that there are things that we can do long before we need regulations. So making sure that we build the paved roads if you're a developer, making sure if you're a customer of software that you start demanding safer software. If you are making the software, make sure you publish all the CVEs and that they're complete and accurate and timely. There's a lot of stuff that we can do as a community that doesn't have to require regulation. So is it inevitable? Well, I don't know, but I know that it's the thing that has created a solid foundation for every other sector. So it seems likely. Planes, trains, automobiles, medical safety, food safety, you name it. There are regulations for all of those. We don't have that in the world of software. And we also have software companies have liability shields. So if you click through the EULA and it says that you can't sue them if there's something that goes wrong. So there are a series of incentives that are in play, and they lead to the world that we're in today. But again, I do think that we're not helpless. We don't have to wait for the government to kick in. I think we have just a ton of work that we can do as long as we start talking about what that is. That's the thing that's been missing from the conversation. Is I think we've had this fatalism, this idea that, oh, we can't do anything. I don't think that that's true. So the first step is just acknowledging that there's a problem and what the sources are, and people will be creative, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think we're seeing that already. I mean, especially now with what people are building. I mean, there's definitely a lot of people building a lot of things that I think will put us in a better spot. So, I mean, I wanted to say thank you both for being on, but also, you've done so much good work over the last years of just raising awareness on all of these issues. Whether it's secure by design and now Hacklore. Thank you a ton, because it's a really great sort of service you're doing for the broader community. So really appreciate it, and really, really excited I was able to have you on here as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the TPRM podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe and share it with a colleague. You can find more insights and resources over at tprmpodcast.com. And until next time, remember, trust nothing, verify most things, and keep building. That's it for this episode of the TPRM podcast. I'm Nate Lee. Thanks for joining me and my guest today. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, and share the episode with your peers and colleagues. For more resources and insights on building business-aligned security programs and managing vendor security, visit tprmpodcast.com and connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.